release of aerosol LSD in the New York
The
subway system.
subway, yes.
And those, we don't have any reports from those tests because, all the documents were destroyed in 1973 because Helms, again, Richard Helms, became very concerned that if any of those documents were released, that the CIA would, have a tiger by the tail, and that the agency probably wouldn't survive that kind of exposure.
God. Yeah, there's so many different connections and and threads here in this story. And another guy that I want to ask you a little bit about as well is Al Hubbard, or the guy who's known as the Johnny Appleseed of LSD.
Right.
You do talk about him as well in the book, don't you?
Yeah, he's actually a fascinating man, and I wish I could have written more about him in the book, and because I had quite a bit of information on him, and the more I learned, the more fascinated I became about him. But like you said, as you said, he's well known as the Johnny Appleseed of LSD. Perhaps if more people had listened to him, everyone would have been better off, because somehow Hubbard became aware of LSD very, very early in terms of its availability, right around 1950. And he was one of the very first people in the world to be able to purchase samples of LSD from the Sandoz company. And he worked very closely with a number of medical facilities in Canada, in Alberta, and I think around British Columbia, with alcoholics, and using the drug LSD to treat alcoholics. And remarkably, within a couple of years, claimed, along with the doctors he was working closely with, an 80% success rate. And a lot of that success was replicated at various hospitals in the United States after that. And it wasn't until LSD sort of got a bad name in the 70s from its street usage and events like Woodstock or what have you, that it was banned, and subsequently scientists weren't allowed to experiment with it. But Hubbard was able to demonstrate to people that it could be a very effective drug in terms of treating certain ailments, one of them being alcoholism, and another being paranoid schizophrenia, and some other mental ailments. Hubbard also very much enjoyed LSD himself, and took it on a regular basis, and he was the one that actually turned Aldous Huxley, the well-known writer, onto LSD. And I think perhaps the social scientist Gregory Bateson first learned about LSD from Al Hubbard. But now, he was a fascinating man, has a very mysterious background. A lot of people claimed he was a multimillionaire and had made a lot of money in terms of dealing with uranium. I was never able to confirm that. I mean, there are numerous people who vouch for that, but very, very interesting guy, and the CIA was well aware of him, and they were concerned about his ready availability to the Sandoz chemical company, but his relationships and connections with so many doctors across the country made him immune to cutting that relationship off, and so he continued on his merry way, apart from everything else that was going on at the time. He wasn't. We know through a few documents that he wasn't very happy about some of the things he learned the CIA and the Army was doing with LSD. He certainly didn't want to see LSD weaponized or used for offensive purposes. But they never consulted him or really listened to him on any basis at all.
So you don't think that he worked in that sense together with the CIA in that way, or? No?
No, they never allowed him to work with them. He had contact with George White. White was aware of him. White was a federal narcotics officer who was working under contract with the CIA. And White was aware of Hubbard's doings. And he knew because of these strange circles that Hubbard always traveled in. He traveled, he circulated among high officials, elected politicians, and some intelligence people. I don't think he had intelligence ties himself. There are a lot of stories that say he was a member of the OSS during the Second World War, and I think he was. But there's also strong evidence that he got into trouble in Canada at the end of his OSS years, and he was actually imprisoned for about a year and a half, and it's real sketchy as to why he was imprisoned. And later on, allegedly, he got one of the presidents, it might have been Roosevelt, to expunge his prison record. But fascinating character. I mean, yes. Absolutely fascinating. The more I learned about him, the more I wanted to know, and so I deliberately fitted him into my book, but I couldn't go too far because he really didn't have anything to do with MK-Ultra or the Olsen story.
Mm. Well, I mean, again, here it's a magnificent book in that sense. You divide it into basically five books in one. It's over 800 pages, and as I mentioned, and I know that last time we talked about a few different things offline. You talked briefly about the links with JFK. That might be too lengthy to go into.
Actually, it would. It would, but I'd love to talk about that because of the links. I've been pursuing the links with JFK, and I can. Did I send you the initial paper I did on that after the book? Or?
No, I did not receive that.
I'll send you a copy of that, and I'd love to. If you want, you can post that on your website. But the number of parallel happenings or I don't, you want to call them coincidences or whatever. I think they go well beyond the stage of coincidence that occurred between the Olsen story and the assassination of JFK are very, very startling. And I decided to do a 3-part article because there's just so much information that connects on these connections, and the first one's done, and I'll certainly send that to you, and you can share it with your listeners. I'd love to hear their reactions to it. And the other 2 parts are probably about a week or 2 away from being completed.
Oh, well, I mean, why don't, if you're up for it, Hank, we'd love to have you back, and maybe we can talk more about that.
I'd be happy to come back and just discuss those connections alone, and maybe some of the latter investigation into the Olsen case in the 1990s, because there's some really fascinating stories around that.
Absolutely, we'd love to do that. But let's round things up here for this time then, Hank, and please again share with our listeners your website address and so forth, so people know where to go to get a copy of A Terrible Mistake, your book. Sure,
you can. A lot of the bookstores are starting to carry the book in Europe now, especially in France and England. You can also, the book's available through Amazon.com in France, the United States, Germany, and I think Japan. Barnes and Noble carries the book. A number of the large trade bookstores in England are now stocking the book. Or you can go my website. The quickest way to get it is through Amazon, from what I can see. But or you can just go to my website or email me. My website is www.albarelli.net. Or you can go to the book's website, which is www.aterriblemistake.com. My address is on both websites, and I like to hear from people. I've a lot of people have contacted me with some very interesting information and just good ideas and fun talk. So So people shouldn't feel adverse to doing that. I really enjoy it.
All right, excellent. Again, then the website's aterriblemistake.com, or check out albarelli.net. We'll have this linked up on Red Ice as well. And do get a copy of this book, because it's really well researched, and it's really interesting in terms of the not only the story about Frank Olson then and what happened there in terms of the CIA connections, but also a lot of these LSD, origins of LSD and the connections with CIA as a weapon, biological weapon and so forth. So really interesting. Hank, keep up the great work. We'd love to have you back soon then, and let's talk more about JFK and all the other things that we need to discuss and get out there, Hank.
Absolutely. I'll be happy to come back.
All right, there you have it. A very interesting second hour with H.B. Albarelli Jr. More is coming up further down the road.